start now. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on the General Ledger reporting function within EXO. My name is Sarah Ward and I'll be going through some basic General Ledger reporting fundamentals along with the system setup that's required to be in place before General Ledger reporting will be effective. Hopefully you've all seen the document that was sent out yesterday. We're going to be going through what was on there and essentially working through those setup configuration points against the General Ledger account groups and the General Ledger accounts. But I just thought it would be useful to send out a document to you all so that in the future when you're setting up General Ledger accounts and account groups, you've got something to refer back to. I'm just going to take a moment now to look at some questions here that people have asked. That's just everyone letting me know that they can hear okay, and that is excellent, thank you. So the first thing that we're going to look at today is the General Ledger account groups. Now these are set up in EXO Configurator and they live under the Admin tab, and if you pop down the left here under account groups against the General Ledger. Now if you want to review them, you simply double click and it brings up all of the details that are assigned against the General Ledger account group. Now, these are just the standard account groups that are set up in EXO when it's implemented. Some of you may have custom General Ledger account groups and some of you may not. It's quite a straightforward process to set up a new one. Just simply push the new one, give it a name. The example that we're going to use today is other income. We're not going to assign it a report code at this point because that's not something we're looking at today. We're going to check its section, and other income will definitely go into the profit and loss, and the debit and credit status. Now income is always credit, so that's quite straightforward. We click on that and save it. If you want to change them, you can just double click and come in and do that. The important thing to remember is that when you set up a new General Ledger account and you assign it to an account group, it will inherit these details from the group. It won't set itself up, but it will just give itself the default, which will be incorrect. So the important thing to remember is that if your General Ledger account group setup is incorrect, it's a strong possibility that your General Ledger account setup will also be incorrect. If you've got the documents from yesterday in front of you, you'll see that I've gone through and listed out all the standard account groups in EXO and just put beside them which section they belong to, whether they're a profit and a loss or a balance sheet, and which sign they have, whether they're a debit or a credit. This should be handy enough information for you just to have in the office for when you're setting up new account groups and for when you're just wanting to double check where things will fall within the General Ledger reports themselves. So, is there any questions about General Ledger account group setup? Okay, that's good. No questions at this point. I'm just going to move on now to the General Ledger account setup. So you can find these under Account General Ledger. It brings up that screen. They also are in the General Ledger tab on the business flow menus and under Maintain Chart of Accounts. Now if you're in here and you want to look at all your active accounts, just hit the search button while the search key is blank and it will bring everything up. Just quite quickly, you'll see that the different accounts are different colours, and that denotes which section they belong to. So income is blue, expenses are red, assets are green, liabilities and equity are purple. It's just basically so that at a glance you will be able to know which group that these belong to and which section they will then appear in the General Ledger reports in. So if I just turn my page over, you can see when we're in these accounts They also have the account group, the debit credit status, and the section defined against them on the details tab. Now, as we mentioned earlier, these are inherited from the account group, but they can be overridden at this point. I'm just going to quickly pop the question pane. Oh, Jelaine has a question here. She's just got a question about resetting the account group numbers. We can do that on a database level, but essentially it's not something that's done in the front end. But Jelaine, I can give you a call after this if you want to discuss that further. Okay, and we'll just go back to here. So back onto our details tab of a general ledger account. As I said, it inherits its configuration from the account group that you've assigned it to, but it can be overridden. It can be overridden using these options here. Flicking between debit and credit doesn't cause too much problems. The big one to remember is that you should never be changing an account from a profit and loss to a balance sheet or vice versa. You'll know that when you try and do that, you get this warning message up on the screen. It says you're changing this from profit and loss to a balance sheet, and it is not recommended that you proceed. When you OK on that, it doesn't revert the selection. So if you were to be, if you're in here making changes and you clicked that, you went OK, if you were then to save, it would change the status. So it's really important to, if you've accidentally done that, just to click it back up to what it ought to be, or cancel out, and it won't allow the changes to be made against the account. Now, on the document that was sent out yesterday, there is a list of just basic standard general ledger accounts and the account group that they should be assigned to based on the standards in EXO, that whether they're a debit or a credit, and the section that they belong in. These are just a sort of a representational list of accounts that most businesses will have. Obviously it's not comprehensive, and if you do have new accounts that you're setting up and you're not 100% sure about what section they belong in or whether they're a debit and a credit, give us a call, let us know. It's just a really quick 5-minute conversation. We can help you to figure out what that needs to be. Just now I'm going to set up some new general ledger accounts just to show you how this works. So the general ledger account number is going to be 1500 and it's going to be interest received. Now I'm going to assign that to our new general ledger account group, other income, and you can see that as I've done that, it's changed from a usual debit to a usual credit as it's inherited the details from the general ledger account group that I assigned it. If I had not assigned a general ledger account group, then it would have not, it wouldn't have automatically changed that debit credit status. And just another one, that is not how you spell that word. Saved, and I'm also going to assign it to the new account group, and it's changed. And one thing I ought to have done earlier is make this GST exempt, and I'll just pop back in and I'll do the same here. Okay, I'm just going to stop for a second to address some questions that have popped up. Oh, Jelaine, that's just Jelaine letting us know that that's all good. So that's fine. We're going to move on to the next part of the webinar now, which is actually having a look at some of the general ledger report options that are standard within EXO. So to run general ledger reports, they 99% of the time will live in the reports menu, down to general ledger reports, and across here to run GL reports. When you go into here, this brings you through the list of all the reports that you have in your system. These are stored actually as individual tables on your database as opposed to clarity reports, which are files stored on your computer. So there is a small difference between how EXO runs these two reports, and you can see that the output does look significantly different between clarity versus general ledger reports. So the one we're going to run today, we're going to have a quick look at the P&L. We're going to set it to the current period, which is July 2016. You can go back for as long as you've got periods set up in your system. You can go back and run reports. Over here, if we untick this, it would bring through every single profit and loss account and include the ones with zero, which would make our report very cluttered. And this here as well, list sub-accounts. So if you had sub-accounts and this was unticked, it would condense them all into one line and it wouldn't show that detail. So I'm just going to confirm that selection for July and hit print. Okay, just gonna, there it is. So here is our general ledger report, just our P&L for July. You can see the current period column, July 2016, the result for this quarter, and then the year to date. Now that runs from financial year as opposed to physical year. Now I'm just going to take a quick screenshot of this just so that we can look at it later when we make some changes to the report and we just want to see how they affect things. So I'll just tuck that out of the way and also tuck this away. So that's pretty straightforward how to run them. You can see that these standard reports that come with EXO are pretty basic. We've got a normal old balance sheet we can run, and you can see there it just has your current assets and current liabilities and everything that you would expect to see therein. I'm just going to minimize that so I can then scroll down and you can see here net assets less liabilities is the same as your shareholder fund, so hooray, the balance sheet balances. Just the next thing we're going to have a wee look at is the setup of the general ledger report. So it lives right above where we run them from. It's just called Setup GL Reports, and you can see it's given us the same list here, and we can double click on it to open it up. So the settings here, this is where that parameters screen gets populated from. These options here are defaults, so if these are ticked on in here, they will automatically be ticked on in the parameters. If they were unticked, they would come through on the parameters unticked, and we'd have to pop in and tick them as we print the report. The data itself is populated from the rows and columns tab. You can see we've got the header of the report, and it's an action type, so that's the basis of all general ledger reporting. Is it's a series of action types that combine together to give you the result. And then say we go to sales there, and that is a subheading. This is the one where the data comes from. This is a sequential range of account groups. So this is the general ledger account groups. You can see here when we look at that, this is our list of all our account groups. And at the moment we're just going from account group 1 to account group 1, so it's only showing us one account group. We can change that to show them all, but we're not going to do that today. It's just for demonstration purposes. If we pop down to this row 75, it's the gross profit, and that's a different function again. This is a profit and loss total function, so this is the sum of all the accounts that are above this line, and it's a total. So what it does there is it then clears out the calculation. If it was a subtotal, it wouldn't do the clear out of the calculation. So we can see there, and then we've got our other expenses combined under the overhead costs section, and finally down to profit and loss, which is a profit and loss grand total function. So this sums, again, everything above it, but it will not re-add the gross profit that has been calculated. It will just simply sum the accounts that are above this line. Okay, so the other interesting thing that you can do here is if you do want to have a play with a general ledger report, you're not you're not really confident to make it from scratch, but you also don't want to change the existing one, this button up here creates a new report based on the one that was highlighted. So if we do that, we get a report number 14, which is simply a copy of report number 2, the P&L report for all branches. That's pretty good. So the next example I'm going to work through is what happens when an account has an incorrect debit or credit status. So sales is always going to be a credit account, but for the purposes of this example, we're going to change it over to a debit so that you can see the effect of what having these incorrect settings assigned does. And we're going to flick accounting fees, which is an overhead cost and should always be a debit. We're going to flick that over to a credit, and just going to run the report just quickly to just show you what happens. So it's going to be the same report. All that we've changed is the debit credit status against the accounts. So if we bring up our screenshot from the earlier report that we ran and don't do that, you can see that now in the current report the numbers are coming through in brackets, because what the general ledger reporting function thinks is that it's delivering a result that is outside of its regular sign. So we've set this as a usual debit. The balance of the account is credit, so it's saying that it's outside of what it usually should be, so it puts it in brackets. And you can see over here that it's not in brackets because it's accepting that it's a credit account and the balance of that account is also a credit. If we pop down to have a look at accounting fees, you can see that that's suffering from a similar problem. It's saying that it's $5,000 in credit, and the only thing that we've changed is that account debit credit status. You can see over here that it was just $5,000. And that, from what I've been able to gather from talking to customers, this is the biggest point of frustration, because if you were to use your calculator to add up these four numbers, you know that it doesn't total to $13,200, because you would put this in as a credit and these other two numbers as debits, and it doesn't sum to that. But over here, where we know the account status was correct, it's showing the numbers with the right sign and the total's the same. So that's really showing why it's so important to have those debit credit statuses set up correctly against the accounts and the account groups in order for the general ledger reporting function to be correct. Okay, we'll stop and see if there's any questions at this point. I've got a question from Ellie. She's just saying that she doesn't see the standard reports when she runs them herself. That could just be that the menu item has been hidden at your entity, Ellie, and if you just want to give us a call, or I'll get someone to be in touch with you afterwards, just to let you know how to turn those on so you can see them. And Jelaine, I see that you've got modified general ledger reports, and you know that some of them aren't showing correctly. You want the original templates back. We can load those back into your system, but we'll have to give you a call after that, because it does require us to get some information from a blank database, but it's not too hard. We can do that. So I'm just going to make a note of that. Reports and Jelaine. So Ellie and Jelaine will be in contact afterwards. And Pip's just commenting that the P&L report line is the same at the bottom, and she thought it would have changed. The reason it doesn't change, Pip, is because the total functions in the profit calculations, they just straight sum the numbers out of the database. They don't actually look at the sign the way that the display of the report does, if that makes sense. It's just one of the little tricks within the system that is what I think frustrates people about it, and there hasn't been a lot of information disseminated about this prior to now, but we're hoping to get it all changed and get everyone's general ledger reporting working well. So that's a good one. So we'll just pop that back down now. Now remember a couple of minutes ago we created a new general ledger account group and some new general ledger accounts. What I'm going to do is put some data into those accounts and add them into a report so that you can see how simple it is to add new general ledger account groups to a profit and loss or to any general ledger report. So we're going to put some interest received in, $1,500, that's doing pretty well. Oh, I've got to put one of those in. The income, and this one going to receive some dividends, just like that. So post these to the general ledger so that if we were to run the reports now, they would appear. So what we're going to do very, very quickly is go back into the general ledger reports setup GL reports. We're going to go to our new one just so we don't corrupt the nice, pretty standard report. I'm just very quickly going to add this new section in. So this is quite straightforward. It's just a simple right click within this box here and you add a new row. So again, remembering that each general ledger account group requires 3 rows to be to come through nicely on the report. The first row we're going to add is the subheading, which is going to be other income, and it's just that simple. Now what we have to be careful of is that everything is in the right order. New lines always appear at the bottom, so we just have to use this little arrow at the side here just to move it up to where we want to see it. So we're going to add another new row in here, which is going to be a sequential range of account groups. And this is just the general ledger account groups that we viewed in the EXO config earlier. And we're going to put other income in there, and we're going from and to other income, just like that. We're not restricting the branch reporting at all, and we just go OK. And again, we just have to scoot it up above that profit and loss function. And then the final one we have to add in is the profit and loss subtotal function. And then we give it a wee caption of total other income. Now we know that this is income, so it should always be credit. So we'll change that status there. I'm happy with how those ticks are and in there. And we scoot it up to where it ought to be in the list and we save and exit. So we're going to pop through to run that report now that we've made the change. And this one here, running it for July, just quickly. You can see over here we've got a new section just at the bottom here. We've got interest received and dividends received, and it has its little subtotal. If we now compare that to the screenshot of the report we ran originally, you can see that the profit and loss at the bottom is adjusted by the value of that other income that we've added. And without actually doing too much to this report, we've added 2 new accounts to it, and that they've been added to the profit and loss total function within here. Right, so that is where we're going to end the that's the webinar today. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them. I'll be here for a while yet to answer any questions that come through. If you've got any reports at your business that you'd like changed or edited and you're not sure how, we can arrange someone to come out and go through that with you. Now, one thing we are thinking about doing in a couple of weeks is an actual training course on general ledger reporting, and that would be an in-person course, and we're just looking out for who might be interested in doing that now. So if you are, chat me on the webinar or ask a question or get back to me this afternoon and just let me know if you would be interested in coming to a training course. The other thing that we'd look at doing is an advanced general ledger reporting webinar, so it would be the same setup as this. It would be a half-hour long session going through some of the more advanced functions within the general ledger reporting. The only problem with webinars is obviously it's quite difficult to get everyone on the same page, which is why we prefer to do our training in person. So if you've got any questions, let me know. If you're interested in attending a training, that would be fantastic. Definitely got some interest in the training. At this stage, we would be running it in Christchurch, but if there was interest in Invercargill or Queenstown, we'd run it there, and same for Dunedin PIP. If we had enough customers from Dunedin that wanted to do it, we'd find a location in Dunedin to run it. We need a room full of computers essentially, so we'd find a place to hold it and run it. We'd have to talk details about how many attendees would be interested. Ellie's just letting us know that Tauranga is probably a bit far to come from, so that's unfortunate, but again we'd try and record the session and put it online. It just wouldn't be as interactive as an in-person training. Rob's keen from Invercargill, so that's excellent. We will send out a sort of an expression of interest for the training to everyone as well, and sort of do some indicative pricing and days and times and how long the course would be. At this stage, I think we're looking at a half-day course, so nothing too chunky, and we'll try and get a lot of documentation for you that you can take back to your businesses, and have that there for reference in the future. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. Again, I'll be here for a few more minutes if anyone's got any questions, or you can contact any of our consultants or the support line if you'd like anything done for your business out of this training session. Thank you.